like to dig into some of the more, some of the more interesting things that Donald Trump has done in his second term. And today we're looking into something that I think a lot of people probably haven't thought too much about.
Yeah.
Which is his approach to the arts and the humanities.
Right.
And this is something that I think, a lot of times it gets overshadowed by the bigger political headlines.
Absolutely.
But it actually reveals a lot, I think, about a government's priorities.
Yeah, yeah.
And, especially during, kind of economically difficult times.
Yeah, it's fascinating how something that seems, relatively minor, like committees and budgets, actually can spark such a big conversation about,
Right.
where resources should go when so many people are struggling.
Yeah, and that's exactly where this whole story about the President's Committee on the Arts and the Humanities, the PCAH,
Right.
comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of give everyone a quick refresher, the PCAH was created back in the 80s during the Reagan administration to advise the government on all things arts and culture. And I mean, we're talking like big names involved in this committee.
Yeah.
Like folks like Yo-Yo Ma.
Wow,
Even
yeah.
Frank Sinatra was a member.
Yeah, I mean, it was really designed to be this bridge between the arts world and the White House, bringing together these experts to offer their perspectives.
Yeah, but so here's where things get really interesting and where Trump's actions, I think, really come into focus.
Okay.
He actually disbanded the PCAH.
I did.
Not just once.
All right.
But twice.
Not once, but twice.
First back in 2017 and then again just recently in 2025.
Right.
So the big question is, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Why dismantle this, pretty long-standing committee, especially when its budget was such a drop in the bucket?
Right.
Compared to, overall government spending.
Yeah, so the first time around back in 2017, it was actually sparked by a wave of resignations from committee members.
Okay.
Protesting Trump's response to the Charlottesville events. So almost the entire committee stepped down.
Wow.
And so Trump ultimately decided to just disband it, citing concerns about fiscal responsibility.
And that's a key point, right? Because we're talking about a time when, the economy was facing some challenges. A lot of Americans were, kind of feeling the pinch.
Yeah.
And the committee's budget in 2024 was around $335,000.
Right.
Which, that is a significant amount of money for most people.
Of course.
But in the context of the federal budget, it's practically a rounding error.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in perspective, the federal government spends trillions of dollars annually.
Right.
So the PCAH budget was, a tiny, tiny fraction of a percent of that.
So if the cost was so minimal, why get rid of it?
Yeah.
Was it purely symbolic?
Right.
Or was Trump trying to make a statement about, the role he saw for the arts and humanities within his administration?
That's where I think the debate gets really interesting, because some critics argued that, disbanding the PCAH was a way of devaluing the arts and kind of sending a message that they weren't a priority for his administration.
Yeah, but I mean, someone else could say that, during a time of economic hardship, every dollar counts.
Right.
And even a relatively small expense like this could be seen as an unnecessary burden on taxpayers.
Right.
Especially when those funds could be, allocated to other, maybe more pressing needs.
That's a very valid point, and it raises the question, I think, of whether a committee like the PCAH is truly essential for promoting and supporting the arts.
Right.
Or, maybe those funds could be better utilized elsewhere.
Yeah, then you have, Biden coming in.
Right.
And reviving the PCAH in 2022.
It did.
Appointing this, really star-studded lineup.
Oh, yeah?
Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
George Clooney.
Yeah.
Shonda Rhimes.
Big names.
Big names. Big impact, right?
Well, the committee only met 6 times since its revival. So
wow.
It kind of begs the question, was it truly achieving enough to justify its existence, even with the small budget? Or was it more about optics and star power than actual impact?
Yeah. And then, boom, fast forward to 2025. Trump disbands it again.
There he is.
No fanfare. This time the website just quietly disappears.
Right.
What message do you think he was sending with that move?
I think that's really open to interpretation. Was it simply a repeat of his 2017 decision?
Okay.
A commitment to fiscal responsibility, even for small amounts, especially in a time when, lots of people are feeling the pinch? Or was there a deeper message about his views on the role of the arts in government?
And this is where things get even more intriguing, because you also have Trump's proposed National Sculpture Park to consider this, ambitious project that aims to honor American icons like Billie Holiday.
Wow.
Miles Davis, Lauren Bacall.
Big names again.
Yeah, and it kind of suggests that he's not necessarily against art itself.
Right.
Maybe he's just against the idea of a committee advising him on it.
It certainly complicates the narrative, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
on one hand, you have the dismantling of the PCAH, which some might interpret as, a lack of interest in supporting the arts. On the other hand, you have this large-scale project that is celebrating American artistic icons.
Right.
So it raises questions about what forms of art he values and how he sees the role of government in supporting them.
Yeah, and it really, I think, raises a question for everyone listening, too, which is,
Sure.
in a world of pressing economic concerns and really tough choices, where do the arts and humanities fit in the bigger picture?
Yeah.
Are they essential investments in our cultural fabric?
Right.
Or are they luxuries that we can afford to maybe cut back on when times get tough?
It's a complex question
Right.
without easy answers, and one that I think each of us needs to grapple with.
Yeah, and we'll dig deeper into those questions
Yeah.
as we continue our deep dive here.
Oh.
But for now, I think we'll leave you to ponder this. Does Trump's decision to disband the PCAH signal some kind of shift in how the U.S. values the arts?
Right.
Or is it a pragmatic response to economic realities? We'll unpack that more in just a bit.
Sounds good.
But first, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay. It's interesting to think about this, from the perspective of everyday Americans, right? People who are maybe struggling to, put food on the table or keep a roof over their heads.
Yeah, that's a crucial point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because while $335,000 might seem like, kind of a small amount
Right.
in the grand scheme of the federal budget,
Right.
it's still a significant sum,
Yeah.
for families that are facing, real financial hardship.
Absolutely. And I think, Trump understands that. I mean, he's consistently presented himself as a leader who's focused on, the economic well-being of everyday Americans.
Right.
So in that context, it's not surprising that he would question the necessity of funding a committee that some might perceive as being out of touch
Yeah.
with the struggles of ordinary people.
Yeah, especially when those funds could be, directed toward initiatives that provide more tangible benefits like job creation programs or assistance for small businesses.
Right. And it's not necessarily about saying that, the arts aren't important.
Right.
It's about recognizing that there are competing priorities. And sometimes difficult choices have to be made about where to allocate, limited resources.
Right. It's about focusing on the essentials.
Exactly.
The things that directly impact people's lives and livelihoods.
Exactly. And that's where I think Trump's, focus on fiscal responsibility comes into play.
Yeah.
He's consistently advocated for, reducing government spending and cutting taxes.
Right.
And his decision to disband the PCAH can be seen as, part of that broader philosophy.
Yeah, it's about sending a message that the government should be, careful stewards of taxpayer dollars, especially during, tough economic times.
And that resonates, I think, with a lot of people who are tired of seeing their hard-earned money wasted on programs they perceive as being, ineffective or unnecessary.
Now, some might argue that, cutting funding for the arts is short-sighted.
Right.
Because the arts can actually stimulate economic growth.
Yeah. That's true. The arts, create jobs, they attract tourism, they contribute to the vibrancy of communities.
Right. But it's also worth noting that, the National Sculpture Park that Trump has proposed
Right.
could be seen as, a pretty significant investment in the arts.
Absolutely. I mean, that project has the potential to create jobs, boost tourism, generate revenue, while also celebrating, American culture and heritage.
So it's not as simple as saying, Trump is against the arts.
Right.
It's more nuanced than that.
It is much more nuanced. Yeah.
He seems to be making a distinction between supporting specific projects that he believes will have, a tangible economic impact.
Right.
And funding advisory committees that he may see as less essential.
Right. It's about choosing to invest in initiatives that align with his vision for a, strong and prosperous America.
And that vision includes, recognizing the economic realities facing many Americans and making tough choices about how to best allocate resources. Now let's kind of shift gears for a moment and consider the argument that arts and humanities are vital to a thriving society.
Okay.
Because they foster creativity, critical thinking, empathy.
Yeah, those are certainly important qualities.
And some might say that, dismantling the PCAH sends a message that those qualities aren't valued at the highest levels of government.
That's a valid concern.
But you could also argue that, these qualities are fostered in many ways beyond government-funded committees.
Absolutely. Families, schools, communities, private organizations all play a vital role in nurturing those qualities.
And let's not forget that the United States has a long history of private philanthropy supporting the arts.
That's a crucial point. Unlike many other countries, the U.S. has a tradition of individuals and businesses, stepping up to support the arts, and that tradition continues today.
So while the PCAH may no longer exist, there are many other avenues
Right.
for supporting and promoting the arts in America.
And perhaps that's, a strength of the American system.
Hmm.
It allows for a diversity of approaches and ensures that the arts are not solely reliant on government funding.
Now, I'm curious, you followed Trump's career very closely.
I have.
Do you see any kind of parallels between his approach to the arts and his approach to other areas of government?
That's a great question. I think there are definitely some consistent themes in his approach.
Okay.
He's consistently emphasized, efficiency, accountability, results.
He's not afraid to shake things up and challenge the status quo.
Exactly. And he's often willing to make tough decisions.
Right.
Even if they're unpopular with certain groups.
He seems to be driven by a desire to do what he believes is best for the country, even if it means going against conventional wisdom.
And that's what makes him such a fascinating and polarizing figure.
It certainly makes for interesting times.
Indeed. And I think his decisions regarding the PCAH are, kind of a microcosm of his broader approach to governing. He's willing to question long-held assumptions and make choices that align with his vision for America, even if those choices generate controversy.
And ultimately, that's what leadership is about, right? Making tough choices and standing by your convictions.
Absolutely. And whether you agree with his decisions or not, I think it's important to understand the rationale behind them.
To see them as part of a broader philosophy and approach to governing.
Exactly. And to recognize that, there are often multiple perspectives on complex issues like this one.
So as we, continue our deep dive here,
Okay.
let's keep those perspectives in mind.
Absolutely.
Let's consider the various arguments for and against, government funding of the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Let's explore the different ways in which the arts are supported in America.
Yeah.
And let's remember that there are no easy answers to these questions.
Nope.
Because ultimately it's about deciding what we value as a society.
Right.
And how we choose to allocate our limited resources.
And that's a conversation that we all need to be a part of.
So let's continue that conversation as we move into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll explore the broader implications of Trump's decisions and the future of the arts in America. Okay, so we've been unpacking, all of Donald Trump's decisions regarding the PCAH. And I'm kind of curious, how this all fits into the bigger picture of his approach to governing.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to bring up because I think you can see a pattern in how he approaches these kinds of issues.
Okay.
He tends to be very pragmatic,
Okay.
focusing on tangible outcomes
Okay.
and efficiency.
So less about symbolism and more about measurable results.
Exactly.
Right.
And he's often skeptical of what he might see as, bureaucratic structures
Mm-hmm.
or unnecessary layers of government.
Which makes his decision to disband the PCAH, a committee that some might see as largely symbolic,
Right.
seem, right in line with his overall philosophy.
Precisely. I mean, he's demonstrated a preference for streamlining government operations,
Yeah.
Reducing spending, particularly on programs he views as non-essential.
And that focus on fiscal responsibility is something that resonates with a lot of Americans, I think,
Oh, absolutely.
especially during times of economic uncertainty.
Yeah. I mean, when people are struggling to make ends meet, they want to see their government being careful with their tax dollars.
Right.
They're less concerned with symbolic gestures and more interested in seeing, concrete action to address the challenges they're facing.
So in that context, Trump's decision to disband the PCAH could be seen as a way of, aligning government priorities with the concerns of everyday Americans.
Yeah, it's about sending a message that the government is focused on, the bread and butter issues that matter most to people's lives.
Yeah, jobs, the economy, security.
That kind of stuff. Yeah, and while, the arts and humanities are undoubtedly important,
Right.
they might not be seen as top priorities.
Right.
When people are worried about, putting food on the table or keeping a roof over their heads.
Now, you've been studying the role of the arts in society for quite some time.
I have, yeah.
What are your thoughts on the broader implications of Trump's decisions here?
Okay.
Do you think it signals a decline in the value that we place on the arts and humanities?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a simple answer.
Okay.
I think it's important to remember that the arts and humanities are supported in many ways
Right.
beyond government funding.
Yeah, we talked about, private philanthropy earlier, and that continues to play a vital role.
Absolutely. And there are, countless individuals and organizations
Right.
working tirelessly to promote and support the arts at the, local, state, and national levels.
So while the PCAH may no longer exist, that doesn't mean the arts are being ignored or neglected?
Not at all. In fact, one could argue that the absence of a centralized government committee
Uh-huh.
could lead to a more diverse and decentralized arts landscape.
Okay, so with more opportunities for local communities to kind of shape their own cultural identities?
Exactly. And that could lead to a more vibrant and dynamic arts scene overall.
So perhaps Trump's decision, while controversial,
Right.
could ultimately have some positive unintended consequences.
It's certainly possible, and it's a reminder that even in times of, political division and economic uncertainty, the arts and humanities continue to thrive in America.
They adapt, they evolve,
They do.
and they find new ways to connect with audiences.
They certainly do.
And they continue to play, a vital role in shaping our culture, our values, our understanding of the world.
Absolutely.
So for those of you listening who are passionate about the arts, don't despair.
Don't despair.
There's still much to be hopeful for.
Yeah, get involved in your local arts community.
Yeah.
Support the artists and organizations you believe in, and advocate for the importance of the arts in education and public life.
Because ultimately, the future of the arts depends on all of us.
It's up to each of us to ensure that the arts continue to flourish in our communities and in our nation as a whole.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Donald Trump's relationship with the arts and humanities.
Great discussion.
It's a complex and multifaceted issue,
It is.
one that raises important questions about government priorities, the role of the arts in society, the ways in which we support and value creativity and culture.
Mm-hmm.
We hope this deep dive has given you some, new insights and perspectives on this ongoing conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.